How you doing? Happy New Year. Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling, along with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. How's your new year going so far, Vince?
Well, it's the year of it's the year of IB so far. I got a bunch of shows working on today, which is awesome. Got two with
It's
Brian,
the
one with
day of
you.
Vince on IB.
I mean, it is what it is. But no, New Year's going so we're a day and a half in so far. No complaints up to this point. How about you? How was your New Year's?
Not bad. Kind of a, chilled weekend. We had Friday, Gator Bowl, and then Saturday it was kind of New Year's Eve, do whatever kind of thing. I had a noon basketball game yesterday.
Right.
And then so didn't do anything crazy Saturday night, getting up, for that on Sunday. And then kind of came back, vegged out, watched a little NFL yesterday. And I had forgotten that there were going to be so many bowl games on today with the whole, New Year's falling on Sunday, which obviously is the NFL day. College football is not going to do that. And I was thinking about this when I was watching the Cotton Bowl, which we'll touch on here in a second, since, there's a lot of schadenfreude going on out there with Notre Dame fans and USC. But why didn't they play the two semifinals today and put some of these other bowl games Sunday? It seems kind of anticlimactic to have these other games going on today after the semifinals Saturday night.
I could not agree with you more, if I'm being honest, because, it was great to have those games a couple days ago. I mean, it was fine, but if you ported and switched them, right, and you had the two semifinal games today, you had these games on the 31st, I think I like that better. I mean, and it is anticlimactic. That's the exact word I was thinking of before while you were talking about it, because these games they're still big games, right? I mean, it's still the Sugar Bowl and it's the Rose Bowl and, all of these different, whatever bowl LSU and Purdue were in. I don't even remember which one that one was, but you have all those games on the 31st.
I believe that was the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, by the way. You had the Cheez-It Bowl and the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, which
Cheez-It needs to pick one. They need to pick one and they need to go with it. But that's neither here nor there, I guess. But I would have liked to see it reversed, if I'm being honest. I think that would have been better because they're not tuned out of college football, but the big games were before.
Well, and there's been conversation about this. This is year 8, I think, of the college football playoff.
Is it really? Wow.
And the first couple years they were playing the semifinals on New Year's Eve, and they found out, hey, people have other things going on New Year's Eve. They don't want to watch two of the biggest football games of the year on New Year's Eve. And so they moved it off it. This year, I was about to say they had no choice, but they do. They did.
Put them whenever they want.
It should be today. If today is taking place of New Year's Day, they should be today with a couple, you could have the Rose Bowl I guess you couldn't have the Rose Bowl as a precursor because they've got their whole thing, with sunset and all that. But they could have the Rose Bowl on Saturday. You could have, kind of started off the day with the Cotton Bowl today, like they started the other day with the Sugar Bowl. You could have the Sugar Bowl later in the day and had your two semifinals tonight. But I guess you're also going up against Monday Night Football, and ESPN has Monday Night Football. So as we talk through this, maybe, Monday Night Football probably played some factor in this whole thing as well.
I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure they got big numbers and all of those different things, but I will say I enjoyed very much the games on the 31st. Like, I just vegged out the whole time and watched football all day long. I mean, I never got out of my lounge clothes. Like, it was a great day. It's a great day.
Yep. Touche, David. Touche. One is Cheez-It, two or more is Cheese Them. And that's right. Because remember, one Cheez-It cracker is a Cheez-It, two or more is a Cheez-It cracker, not Cheez-Its, according to the official Cheez-It record. So
I sent you a picture of my Cheez-It that I was eating one at a time while watching college football on Friday. One Cheez-It, one at a time.
Hit that like button if you would. Subscribe, rate, and review. We've got all kinds of Notre Dame football we're going to talk about. How about that Cotton Bowl, though? Did you see? You caught the tail end of it. I caught it when it was still – it was awesome. man, to see USC get stuff for that safety in the end zone, the nose guard just blew up the running back.
Apparently, I just missed like the good parts of the Cotton Bowl because I had
Yeah,
it on during the show when Brian and I were talking and doing our thing. I had it on. I was watching. It was a competitive game. But then when USC goes up 2 scores, it's like, it was good job, Tulane. Way to keep up the fight. That kind of a thing.
that's what I
Close it
thought
up.
too.
I put Notre Dame back in and I start watching that, getting ready for tonight's show. And then I get all these texts from people. Hey, are you watching the game? What's going on? That was a catch. All these different things. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And then I turn it on to watch USC go 2 plays and, at the very end of the game when it didn't matter anymore. Like, I missed all the excitement.
Leave it to an official standing 5 yards from what turns out to be the game-winning touchdown to miss the call on the field. He said the ball was on the ground. They went to replay. It was an easy replay. Kevin Bauman, the Notre Dame injured tight end, his brother Alex caught the game-winning touchdown for Tulane.
I was wondering about that because I saw Bauman and I'm like, wait a minute, he didn't transfer. So is there a relation? Like, how does this work? There it is. Thank you.
There it is.
Because obviously you had Lawrence Keys III. He was there.
And I had forgotten that he was there. And it was kind of interesting that he was playing against USC, considering he quit right after the USC game a few years ago.
That is true.
Got to play USC
and he got to beat him. So good for him. That's awesome.
Got to beat him this time. Tell you what, that Michael Pratt, Tulane quarterback, he's like the typical gamer kind of quarterback, the kind of guy you want on the team. He's not like the speedster like Caleb Williams, but he was making plays with his legs. He kept taking hits and he kept getting up. They converted a couple 4th downs on that game-winning touchdown drive. And it was just like you and I were just talking about this before we went on. This is really the biggest takeaway because Tulane ends up scoring 46 points on USC, burying the lead here. How did Notre Dame not score more points against that USC defense, man? Because they could not stop anything today.
I don't know. And it makes it even more frustrating. Like, it was a day of like handing out awards on our other show. And then you just think to yourself, the what ifs, right? If Notre Dame could have gotten their offensive act together, right? No matter what Caleb Williams did, if Notre Dame could have had an offensive explosion like, I don't know, everyone else does apparently against USC's defense, then Notre Dame's playing in that game right there. Instead of USC, it's Notre Dame playing in that game, number one, against Tulane. Now, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. But, I mean, it's just we're having a completely different conversation right now.
I think Notre Dame's defense could have limited it, because there were times like USC goes down, scores their touchdown, and the next thing you know, here's the Tulane running back ripping off a 60-yard run, or here's a little slant that turns into a 70-yard pass play for Tulane. It's just it was nuts. It was a lot of fun to watch, though.
And
it's a good way to spend Monday, I'll tell you that.
And on top of that, you just watched Notre Dame put up 500 and whatever yards, 558 yards or whatever it was, 38, 58. And you're like, they can do that to an SEC defense. Be really nice if they could have done that to an average at best Pac-12 defense. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, if only.
Yep.
Well, it is what it is.
Well, how about that Gator Bowl, though? That turned out to be pretty fun to watch too. I know you talked, you guys had the post-game show and you had 1 million people watching Friday night on the post-game show. 45-38. In your eyes, did Notre Dame prove anything in the win over South Carolina?
It was more, yes. The short answer is yes. Now, what did they prove? Okay. They proved to me that they're not the same team that they were a year ago in the Fiesta Bowl, where they had a big lead and blew it, right? They were down by a bunch and had the fortitude, the never say die attitude to come back and win the game, which I don't know that happens last year. You know what I mean? And we obviously have the prime example of the Fiesta Bowl to look at in that regard. And now it was a New Year's Six Bowl, so it was a little bit different. But at the same time, you're down 2 scores. They were up 3 scores before, and they were able to come back, right? So, I think we learned something not only about this coaching staff, but about this team in general. I think in the past, there's some kids, I won't say they're going to quit, but I don't know that this team comes back.
Well, you know what? When you talk about opt-outs and all those different things, and you've got a different quarterback than you've had most of the season, there's every reason to hang your head. And, like bowl games, you just never know what you're going to get anyway. And
Yep.
guys fly in from home and, end up down at the bowl game and, then they fly out, they get to go home for a little bit afterwards. I mean, there's every reason for guys to be emotionally checked out in what is referred to as a tier 3 bowl game, because
Yep.
you've got your playoffs as tier 1, you've got New Year's 6 as tier 2, and then these games after that, it's a tier 3 bowl game, so
Sure.
it's not, doesn't have near the impact. It's not as high profile even as the Fiesta Bowl last year. And so the fact that they could have the resolve to get down the way they did early on, and the way it happened, when you're talking about 2 momentum changing plays, like a fake kick that goes for a touchdown and a pick six that obviously goes for a touchdown, there's every reason for everybody to check out. It's 21-7 almost before you blink an eye.
There's plenty of fans
And the
checked
fact
out
that
at
they
that
showed
point.
the resolve to keep plugging away, I think that showed a lot for the whole program.
I completely agree. I mean, like I said, a lot of fans checked out at that point. I was getting a lot of text messages, and I was literally texting people, relax, breathe. It's the first quarter. Like, it's going to be okay. Just everybody take a breath. There's 3 quarters of football left to play. Now, I don't think I would have predicted over 500 yards of offense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't throw the towel in the first quarter. I mean, you got to kind of let things marinate, and you got to let the game kind of come to you, for a cliche. But the way that South Carolina was playing in that game, it wasn't sustainable, in my opinion, right? I mean, trick plays, reverses, bringing in a wildcat quarterback, they were literally pulling out all the stops to score and to stay competitive with Notre Dame. That's not sustainable for an entire game.
And we were, you and Jesse and I were kind of in a little group text about that, and you kind of said that, but it's like, man, just like they were out there kind of attacking the perimeter, sort of the way Clemson wanted to do, like Clemson kept trying to do in the Notre Dame game, but Notre Dame just swarmed Clemson. South Carolina was able to make plays out of it early on, and it's concerning. But again, and Brian was one of the first to point this out, I hadn't really thought about it. The fact that a year ago in the Fiesta Bowl, you're up 28-7 and you end up losing that game. And then a year later, end of Marcus Freeman's first season, you're down 21-7 and you come back to win. There's definitely, like some karma, some symmetry, whatever you want to call it in there. The fact that you can close it out like that. So, again, I've never been one to buy in big time on the whole idea of winning your bowl, get you off-season momentum, carries momentum into the off-season and that kind of stuff. But I think at the very least, we saw some really good signs, like, again, because what did we learn from this whole thing? We saw really good signs as it pertains specifically to Marcus Freeman and where he has this program and the mentality of this program. So, whether that carries into the offseason or not, I think it's very important to see that in a game that, again, is not, it's, like somebody said, well, Gator Bowl is still one of your more high profile games. Trust me, I was with Notre Dame administration type people last week in Miami. It's referred to as a tier 3 bowl game, and that's how a lot of people looked at it. The players didn't seem to have that attitude, like they were tier 3, that kind of thing.
No, yeah, which is fantastic. I mean, the reality of the situation is the last time Notre Dame won a bowl game was 2019, right? I mean, that was they needed to, I mean, at the very least, they needed to go out and win this game, right? The manner in which they won it also makes me feel better moving forward, with everything that's involved, right? And we can break down that game as much as we want, and I know we're going to talk about it, but the way they won is great. But the fact that they won, because remember we talked about that, right? What's the best thing that can come out of this game? A victory. That's tier 1, a victory, right? And then you look at the tier 2 objectives, Tyler Buchner and how he played, the defense, how they play, or whatever the case may be. But the tier 1 thing was always win the game, and they were able to do that.
Yeah. What you were talking about, and I did have some internet connection issue here, but I'm back obviously now.
Yeah, you're great now.
Connection is better. But quarter by quarter, the offense for South Carolina, that's what we were talking about when I kind of cut there a little bit. First quarter, they had 154 yards. Second quarter, 98 yards. Third quarter, 68. And then fourth quarter, less than half of that, 32. It got decidedly less each quarter because of what you were talking about. The trick stop, pulling out all the stops, like going off script from what Al Golden saw during the season. Kind of, again, sort of reminiscent to what Tommy Rees did last year in the Fiesta Bowl. They showed a lot of different things. They were down some personnel because of opt-outs and transfers and all that kind of stuff, which we talked about going into the game. So they tried some things early on. They had some success with it. It was not sustainable. Al Golden made great adjustments defensively throughout the course of the game with that defense. And guys were, and Notre Dame was down some guys defensively, obviously, too. They ended up without Benjamin Morrison for half the game.
Well, as I mentioned, I don't know, did you watch obviously based on what we're going to talk about later on, I assume you watched the post-game comments of Shane Beamer. I mean, if you just go off of that and you didn't watch the game, you'd have thought that he found 25 guys in the parking lot and suited them up, based on that. But
it was a very Josh Pastner, Georgia Tech basketball. Like, I'm coaching them all up. I've done everything I could to get these guys ready to go. And, we did everything but go down to the student union to pluck out some guys from the JV team or whatever.
I mean, and look, man. He did a good job of coaching them up and coming up with creative ways to get the kids inspired and all of that. I give him credit. I think he's a good coach. But
I do too.
But Notre Dame was missing a ton of dudes too. A ton of guys that are extremely important to what they want to do, both offensively and defensively. They were missing them, right? And so, but that of course never gets talked about. And you never heard Marcus Freeman talking about all the guys that they were missing. And I respect Marcus Freeman for that. I really do, because he never once brought that up, not during bowl prep, not in the post game.
Well, that's what I like respect the most about a couple. There's a lot of things to respect about Marcus Freeman. It's non-excuses, non-BS,
right.
and the fact, obviously, that no matter what happens, he's not going to throw the players under the bus. And that's important. Like when it comes to long-term trust, that was obviously an issue with the last guy who, got to take a Cheez-It bath and eat some Cheez-Its today. So.
Wish I could have seen that. But yeah,
would you put Cheez-Its in mayo? That's the question.
Yikes. It's a heart attack waiting to happen right there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what about Tyler Buchner? What did we find out about that guy?
So, I mean, you remember me joking around, and it was on this show. Somebody was talking about Buckner in the chat. I was like, look, he's not going to go out there and be responsible for 5 touchdowns, 4 through the air, 1 on the ground. Like, that's never going to happen. Everybody just needs to relax. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Well, he was responsible for 5 offensive touchdowns. It was just 3 through the air and 2 on the ground.
Yeah.
And yes, he made a boneheaded mistake with the little flip interception. He was trying to make a play. He made a boneheaded mistake, even though you can argue about the call on the pass down there on the goal line where he threw the pick 6. You can't throw that ball. I mean, he made some boneheaded plays. There's no doubt about it. But you also saw some great things, and the reason why Notre Dame sees what they see in him and why they recruited him in the first place, you saw a lot of that. So, did we learn something about Tyler Buchner? Dude, he doesn't give up.
He's got a short memory too. Yeah, man. That's exactly right. And like they were not putting bubble wrap on him. They were not handling Tyler Buchner with kid gloves out there. They put a lot of responsibilities on his shoulder. And when they decided they were going to do that quarterback sneak early on and they push it right up the middle, it's like they're not afraid of him taking contact.
Nope.
And he was willing to stand in the pocket and take some hits as well. That's what one of the things that impressed me the most about him, because, like you can talk about, the pick 6 is like, are giving up 2 pick sixes good? Of course they're not good. Ask the kid up at Michigan if giving up a couple of pick sixes are good.
Oh,
But
it's some fun with that one.
yeah. But you're absolutely right. Like, this is why they had the confidence in him coming into the season, and even missing nearly 16 weeks and all those games from games 1 and 2 to where they are now. 1, the defense looked a lot different. 2, or not the defense, the offense looked a lot different. The offensive line, I was a little bit concerned about the offensive line early on. Like, there was some pressure on Tyler Buchner.
This was
like,
not,
where's this coming from?
This was not the offensive line's best game by any stretch of the imagination. And
No.
I would ask everybody to tune in at 8 o'clock when we do some upon further review, when we look at the film and everything. This was not Notre Dame's best effort on the offensive line, particularly in the first half, right? So, yes, you are absolutely correct. There was a shot there was a shot on the sideline at one point. I think it was in the second half. The back of Tyler Buchner's jersey was green, and they weren't wearing the green jerseys, okay? Like, there were grass stains on the back of his jersey because he was taking some hits.
Yeah.
And hanging in there, man. That pass that he had in the first quarter on 3rd down to Jaden Thomas, wow. Like, literally drops the arm angle. He's getting hit, and he puts the ball exactly where it needs to be on third.
And that's like seeing those different arm angles. It looks cool for one thing, but that's a sign of athleticism.
Absolutely.
The fact that without thinking, he can just drop that arm angle and he's zipping it the way he's zipping it in there. And like the deep shot to Lenzy, he's taking a hit. He's throwing off his back foot, and he puts it right in the spot where it needs to be. He led him downfield. And like, I've got this. I'll just go ahead and throw it in there right now, because one of Drew Pine's old, personal quarterback coaches tweets at some point during the first quarter, "You missed Drew yet?"
No. I mean,
not at all. Sorry, Drew, not at all.
No.
Because again, like, despite the mistake, were any of the, the biggest mistake that Tyler Buchner made in the first quarter was the pick six. Okay. Well, what happened on the pick six? He threw into the line and it got batted, and then it goes into the hands of a defensive back and it goes back the other way. We saw Drew Pine, Drew Pine, you could make a highlight reel,
yes.
of Drew Pine throwing into the line of scrimmage. So, if you're going to take a shot at this kid, why don't you look at your own kid that you were personally coaching up? Where exactly did you coach that kid? I'm sorry.
Right.
No.
And that's
Tyler
such a
Buchner
petty
did
tweet.
so many things that Drew Pine couldn't do.
Never.
And again, like the leading and the throwing of the ball downfield to Braden Lenzy. We're going to talk about Braden Lenzy later on, but like, it was like a highlight reel for the season for Braden Lenzy out there. And Tyler Buchner was one of the big reasons for it.
And he threw that off his back foot. Like, that was not, it wasn't like a set throw where he was able to step up in the pocket or any of that. Like, he had to throw that off of his back foot and still threw Braden Lenzy open on that play. Okay. Braden Lenzy had 3 or 4 of those every single game. The ball just never went his way. Okay. One game with Tyler Buchner, and all of a sudden he's getting deep shots to Braden Lenzy. He's getting slants over the middle to Braden Lenzy, right? Like, it's a different offense when Tyler Buchner is behind center. Period. End of discussion. And it's that was such a petty tweet by this guy to do that, because
who it is, I didn't write it down. I saw it retweeted, but I didn't say his name on purpose because I don't feel like it's worth mentioning someone's name like this, because he was obviously looking for attention to begin with.
And that's the thing. And it's like, I don't have any ill will towards Drew Pine. He did exactly what he was asked to do as the backup quarterback. You know what I mean? I don't have any ill will towards Drew Pine. He had a big hand in saving what could have been a really, really bad season.
Yeah.
So do I miss him being a part of the roster? Absolutely.
Look, I had a lot of respect for the kid right up until they had the meeting with him, and he just up and bolted from the team.
Yes.
So it's basically changed how I feel about him forever.
And I get that. I totally get that. I from a football standpoint, I would love for him to be a part of the roster. I get, that's how I feel. I don't like the way he handled the situation any more than you do. That's a fact.
Yeah.
But to tweet that out is super duper petty, and it's not mature in any way.
Right.
Like, come on, man. Like, you're an adult. You're a grown man. Nobody misses him because he was the backup quarterback and always was going to be as long as Tyler Buchner was going to be healthy and on the roster.
Right. You did an admirable job of leading the team to an 8-2 record while the starting quarterback was out.
Right.
The starting quarterback came back, and we saw the reason why. Now, again, like, were any of the actual mistakes that Tyler Buchner made, any worse than some of the things that we saw Drew Pine do during the season? Again, my answer is no. Now, we can talk about the pick six in the end zone because, again, the first one deflected at the line.
Sure.
That just as easily could have been Drew Pine and had that ball deflected, and the exact same thing happens. Because, again, how many times do we see Drew Pine throw the ball into the line of scrimmage? But, I think most people's biggest problem with the second pick six is just the fact that you had just rammed the ball down their throat 6 consecutive plays, and they were all but ready to yell "No mas, no mas," and you hand them, you give them a ticket right back into the game as it goes the other way. There was no reason, because again, like, even if you hand it off 2 more times, and then maybe you decide to go for it on 4th down, if it came to that, you could have burned up another minute or so on the clock. At the very least, like, running a couple more times is just going to keep the clock running.
Sure.
And you're going to have a 2-possession lead if you push it into the end zone. Throwing the ball there was just that was the most baffling part. Buckner needs to make a better decision, but just the decision to run the ball at that point, to me, is more baffling.
In the moment, watching the game, I was like, what are they doing? Like, when he dropped back, I was like, what is happening? Why are they, why? And of course, then he throws the pick and it goes the other way. And it's like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. They were gashing, like, cause you're absolutely right. No mas was absolutely the rallying cry for South Carolina at that point, a la like USC in the second half of the beatdown they took at Notre Dame a few years ago, right? Like, when Quentin Nelson was just pancaking dudes left and right, it was, we're good. We give up. Like, this is it. We're done. And they just handed them the game back. And it was super frustrating. Super frustrating. The only thing that, like, I never felt, even though he took it back to tie the game and all that, like, I never felt Notre Dame was going to lose the game at that point because of the way that drive transpired and what they were able to do during that drive. Like, I had a lot of confidence that they were going to be able to pick up right where they left off and drive right back down the field again. But I didn't want it to be in that scenario. You know what I mean? Like, I did not want that to be the case, and yet it was. So that was frustrating. No doubt about that.
Yes. Here's my question to you, though. Okay, so everyone, we're all completely willing to criticize the decision to call a pass play in that situation, which Marcus Freeman came back afterwards. He said there was a specific look they were looking for.
Sure.
They shouldn't have thrown it, shouldn't have called it. Okay. Mea culpa, whatever. It's a lot easier after you win, to be able to come back and say that.
For sure.
Here's my question, though, because we're going to criticize the decision to pass into the end zone on the pick six. Then the next time they get down there into the red zone, like, what do we make of that decision just because it worked out on the touchdown pass to Mitchell Evans? Are we just good with it because it worked, or, what do you think?
No, I when I first read your question, I was like, damn, that's a really good point. Here's the difference for me, though. And there is a slight difference. The difference for me is the pick six was on 1st and goal from the 7-yard line.
Right.
You didn't need to throw that
touchdown
ball.
Was on 3rd down. Yeah.
Correct. That's the biggest difference. And it was from the 16-yard line.
Right.
So your 3rd and 7 from the 16 or your 1st and goal from the 7. So it's a little bit of a different scenario. So I don't have a problem with them throwing the ball on 3rd and 7 because of the situation, right?
And it was a beautiful play design.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So much better. 100%. It was so much like, if they had run that play on the first one, they might have got, because they did and it's still the thing that frustrates me with their ability to run the ball the way they did. Like, they do so little play action on
Right.
first down after you've run the ball so often on first down. And I
Sure.
don't know why, especially with the mobile quarterback like Buckner mixed in there, but the play action, a little slight, roll to the right, and then the throwback to a wide open Mitchell Evans. I mean, it was beautiful play design. If the first one had actually had some
Sure.
different thinking behind it. Although I will say this, I don't know if you went back and watched the pick six yet, since you were watching,
Not yet. I've
went
gotten to the
back and
first
watched.
half.
I noticed this on my rewatch. Logan Diggs was held on the pick six. He was
Of course.
in the slot to the right, and the
Okay.
defensive back just basically reaches his arm out and
Prevents
wraps
him
him
from-
up and then lets him go. And of course there was no
Right.
flag, but it's right in there. He would have been running right in front of Tyler Buchner. So I don't know if that was like the first option, like go to Diggs on the slant or what.
Right.
But
I mean,
but
you can't throw the ball there. Like, you
Exactly.
can't. You have to make a better decision. At the very least, it's 1st and 7. Put it in the stands. Like,
Right.
throw it out of bounds. I mean, there's a million because I almost guarantee you, if he puts that into the stands or it's incomplete or whatever, guess what they're going to do on the next 2 plays? Run the ball. They're going to run the ball. Like, that was their chance to catch South Carolina off guard, by throwing the ball on first down. Okay, I guess. But then they're going to go back to what's working. They're going to run the ball on 2nd and 3rd down if they don't get into the end zone. So, Tyler needs to throw that away. And that's where the inexperience comes in. I mean, plain and simple. It's his 3rd start of his career. And I heard this stat today. It's the first win as a starting quarterback that he's had since his junior year in high school in 2019.
Yeah.
So he's got a ton of inexperience. That's an inexperienced throw
in a bowl game after missing the entire season. But I thought he showed and he talked about beforehand being in the coach's box all season and just video, watching game film and stuff like that. Obviously, he seemed to have not that he was like panicked or happy feet or any of those kind of things the first couple games, but he definitely seemed more poised and more confident in what he was seeing from the defense.
That I agree with wholeheartedly. He never looked out of place as the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, and the 500 plus yards of offense tells you that. Now, they had 200 yards on the ground. I totally get that. But here's the reality, folks. He outdueled, if you will, the great Spencer Rattler. He had more passing yards than Spencer Rattler did.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you would have told me that Tyler Buchner was going to have more passing yards than Spencer Rattler, I told you were probably crazy. Yes. Because they're a very one-dimensional offense is South Carolina, especially with their leading running back out. I told you were crazy. And look, his percentage wasn't great. He still needs to hit some of those layups. There's a lot of things that Tyler Buchner needs to clean up in his game. Still had over 275 yards in the air and another 60 plus or something on the ground. He was responsible for 5 touchdowns. So we learned a lot about Tyler Buchner. I think he gets the first jab in the quarterback race for who's going to be the starting quarterback. He got the first jab. Now there's going to be plenty of counter punches and all those different things. He gets the first one. We'll see what happens. Let the best man win. I said this in the earlier show, man. I do not have a dog in the fight, whether it's Sam Hartman, whether it's a different transfer. Well, I don't care who it is. Whoever wins this battle, if it's a legit battle, which I think it will be, whoever wins this battle is going to be in a great position to lead this team to a lot of wins next year.
Mike says that he doesn't think Notre Dame needs a transfer quarterback after the bowl game, and the focus should be on defensive transfers. What do you think about that?
Who do we need on the defense? Maybe one defensive lineman? Other than that, who else do you need?
Defensive lineman. There's talk about a safety potentially.
I don't think that's necessary. I don't think there's anybody out there that wows me more than what they've got on the roster right now.
Yeah.
And yes, you need at the very least, you need a body in the quarterback room because I think
another wide receiver actually.
That'd be fine. They're bringing in a bunch of wide receivers, obviously.
No, I know, but let's remember there's still freshman receivers, and as much talent as Tobias Merriweather, we still barely saw him this year. And what happened? Everyone
Well,
was
that was
clamoring
that,
for
a
him
lot
that
of that
year.
was due to injury.
Well,
Halfway through the season, he was almost
I'm trying to think of how many games that would, a little bit more than halfway. We're still in the like 7-8 games range that he hadn't kind of taken that step and found his way on the field. Now he would have the last 3 games or so, if not for the concussion, but that's still, again, that's like 8-9 games. So you're more than
right.
Basically
They brought in one already.
3/4 of the season.
They already brought in one receiver.
Right.
And so that's basically a trade-off for Braden Lenzy.
You got Colsey back.
Yep. You got Jaden Thomas back.
You got Jaden Thomas.
Both Lorenzo Styles.
So, yeah. You got Merriweather. And then the transfer. That's 5. I mean, how many?
And then they're bringing in 3 or 4 freshmen.
True. But I guess the question is, do you want one more guy with some experience? Because you are losing. Like you said, that the Virginia Tech guy Bailey basically replaces Lenzy.
But I think
I wouldn't mind having one more guy with some experience.
I'm good. I don't want any more. I really don't, because you're talking about now Jaden Thomas could very easily be a number 1 or a number 2 receiver at this point. Like, I think his game has matured to that point already. Now, anybody that's going to say Lorenzo Styles had a good season is nuts. Like, that did not happen. Now,
right.
He still has the ability to be a really good receiver. This was one heck of a sophomore slump. He's going to have to do a lot in the offseason to convince me otherwise.
He made a nice progression. He was the top leading wide receiver in the room. But obviously with the drops that he had. Now, again, how much difference would a different quarterback make for a guy like Lorenzo Styles?
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. And I think that is I don't think they had the right quarterback under center to really bring these receivers along either.
Yeah.
He needed receivers to make plays for him, not the other way around. You know what I mean? And maybe Tyler Buchner would have been similar, but I think we at least got a vision of what Tyler Buchner can be in the passing game. I mean, he's stretching the field, he's completing third downs. Like, he's doing some things and going through progressions, unlike Drew.
Here's the other thing. Okay, because the question, the comment was he doesn't think that they need to bring in a transfer quarterback. I think we can all agree that if they had like someone of Sam Hartman or whoever's, a Jack Cohn, we said before, if they had Jack Cohn, they're probably battling to be in the playoff at the end of the season if they had Jack Cohn instead of Drew Pine this season. So then next year, you bring in a guy with experience, and you've got Tyler Buchner, who has at least a little bit of game experience now. He showed that he can win. I mean, what this season showed was you need 2 quarterbacks, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Like, so whether it's Tyler Buchner as the starter, you still don't know what Steve Angeli can do. I think there's no reason not to bring in a quarter. You need
4. You need 4, in my opinion, right?
4 quarterbacks?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry to all the RP3 lovers out there. Ron Paulus III is not one of those 4, okay? But you need a quarterback in every class, in my opinion. You need 4 guys, and you need 2 guys that you trust to run the offense. I mean, your 1 and your 2, you should be able to trust, right? So right now, if they don't get a transfer, you're going to have Tyler Buchner, Steve Angeli, and Kenny Minchie. Those are going to be 3, right? You need a 4th. In my opinion, that's where the transfer comes in. So, and if you're going to go out and get a transfer, at least bring somebody in who's going to compete for the job.
And I was going to say, you want someone who's going to give you true competition for the job. That's because it's just going to make the other guy better. And then, what happens after that, we don't know.
Right. Absolutely. So, yes, I think they do need to bring somebody in way more important than any other position that's out there as far as bringing in a transfer.
And then, Zach asked this. I was going to save it, but we'll go ahead and throw it in here. Do you think Buckner transfers when they give Hartman the starting job, is what he says?
First of all, that's awfully presumptuous. Second of all, is it possible? Sure. I mean, it's possible. Brian brought up a very interesting scenario last show. Let's say Hartman does win the job. Tyler Buchner gets another year of development underneath. Maybe he's got a package, that kind of a thing. He still has 2 years of eligibility left after that. he could take over and still play for 2 more years, and then you hand it off to either Minchie or Carr. I mean, there's still a nice succession plan of quarterbacks in there if Tyler Buchner sticks around. Who's to say the grass is greener in another pasture if Tyler Buchner leaves? You know what I mean? After if he happens to get beat out by Hartman, I still want him around. I don't think that he would transfer, but he's going to have 3 years of eligibility left, just like Drew Pine. So he could very well transfer. I hope he doesn't, because I think there's still opportunities here at Notre Dame to be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that he will either, just because, again, like he found out, just like Drew Pine found out, that they were going to go to the transfer portal, and
Still here
he is. And
Yeah.
I just, it's not what he doesn't seem like he would be that kind of guy.
Yeah, right.
So I don't think so. But the other side of that is, and we've talked about this before, Vince, once you start getting the numbers at quarterback like you're talking about, a transfer at some point is going to be inevitable. They're not all going to stay around, because there can be only one. And then you just have to keep, going out and recruiting well at that position. Just like we've talked about, you've got to keep your recruiting at that quarterback position as high as possible. Get those guys in there, highly talented guys competing for the job every year.
Yeah.
Someone's going to win the job. Again, there's always a chance that someone's going to get hurt, so that gives somebody else. Look at TCU. They started Sonny Dykes started the season with a different quarterback. They had demoted Duggan, and then that guy got hurt. Duggan took it back over, and here they are playing for a national championship now.
Absolutely. Yep, no question. And again, it sounds like I'm, Mr. Tyler Buchner, and I want him to be the starter and all that. I am in the Notre Dame wins a national championship bandwagon. That's where I am. And at the end of the day, let the best man win, because there's going to be a ton of talent around him, right? No matter who they plug in on the offensive line at guard, they're going to have a stacked backfield. The wide receivers are only going to get better. They're going to have a defense with all kinds of pieces to it. This is going to be a team that is going to be reckoned with, regardless of who the quarterback is. And if there's a legit competition from what we saw from Tyler Buchner and what we've seen from whoever the transfer quarterback is, there's going to be a legitimate competition. So whoever wins that competition, let's go.
Yeah.
Roll on. Let's hit this thing. I mean, either way, 23 is going to be a very, very exciting season.
I concur. I think there's a lot of things to look forward to.
Yeah.
Next year, you're bringing
No
back.
doubt.
You're bringing back a ton of guys offensively. You're bringing back a ton of, basically, you're bringing
the whole offense, essentially, except for your 2 guards.
Yeah.
That's it.
Exactly.
Everybody, and Braden Lenzy,
you're losing Lenzy, but you're replacing him,
right?
With a guy, who's got a lot of experience himself.
8 true sophomores started on offense on Friday. 8. So the future is bright, people. And those 8 sophomores put up a heck of a lot of yards and points.
Yeah, absolutely. Vince, I know you've got another show to do tonight.
That's okay. Let's go.
So, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go, baby. That was for you, Salty.
Just for you, Salty. All right. So, first question, fill in the blank. ESPN's Dan Orlovsky tweeting after the Gator Bowl, "We firing Tommy Rees tonight, or is 45 without your best player good enough?" That's blank.
Hilarious. I mean, the sentiment is accurate, okay, because he's poking the Notre Dame fans that were calling for Tommy Rees's head. And if you were in the chat during the post-game show, there's plenty of people that still want to fire Tommy Rees because he called an amazing game, had a great game plan, but calling the pass on 1st and 7 at the goal line that ended up being a pick 6 is a fireable offense.
Right.
So there's plenty of people out there, Dan, that want Tommy Rees fired. So I think the tweet is hilarious. And I mean, he's, like I said, he's poking at the fans, and I don't blame him. It's fun to do that at times. But, Tommy Rees called a pretty darn good game in the Gator Bowl. He really did.
One, I love the way Dan Orlovsky just loves him some Tommy Rees.
Oh, he does.
And this goes back a few years now to when Notre Dame played Iowa State in the bowl game, and Orlovsky was doing that game. I mean, he was on the Tommy Rees bandwagon. He obviously, and I think, did he do the bowl game? Did he do the Fiesta Bowl last year too? I can't remember now. I think he might have.
He did. I think he did. Yeah.
Because he was raving about how Tommy Rees develops quarterbacks.
Loves it.
Look at what we just talked about, all the stuff we talked about with Tyler Buchner and the things that Tyler Buchner can do and how different that offense looks. Yes. Again, as Orlovsky pointed out, without their best player, Michael Mayer, look at how different that offense looked when they had the guy who was the starter at the start of the season compared to the guy they had to bring along throughout the course of the season, the guy who was throwing balls in the ground the very first opportunity he had against Cal. I said this before at the end of the season, before Drew Pine ever transferred. What if the Drew Pine that we saw this year, as much as people want to complain, and we've complained about Tommy Rees sometimes too with some of the play calling and things like that. What if the Drew Pine that we saw was the absolute best you were going to get out of Drew Pine this season? And I think that looking at this Gator Bowl kind of puts a different perspective on some of that with what they were able to do. The fact that you had a quarterback who could throw the ball downfield and lead receivers effectively and not just lock in on one guy. I think that, does it cover up everything that we saw this season? There's still some questions with Tommy Rees, but at the same time, I agree. Again, the Dan Orlovsky love for Tommy Rees.
It's hilarious.
It's like, get a room,
hilarious,
guys.
Yeah, it's borderline BK love for Tommy Rees too. I mean, it's it's in the same family.
I feel much more confident, because I spent all the offseason talking about how, this guy can play to the strengths of the personnel and all this different stuff. It felt like, they kind of tried to ram down everyone's throat what they thought were the strengths of the team early on that weren't the strengths. And they obviously had a hard time adjusting at times, but I think we saw, a completely different level of what Tommy Rees can be. And then the fact that you got Tommy Rees also out there tweeting the other night, thanks for the season and thanks for this. And even to the Twitter haters and all this stuff, so it's like Tommy Rees is tweeting at the Twitter haters too. So,
which is not surprising because he's still a kid and, that Twitter is, like his thing or whatever. And I get that. And I also understand where people are coming from a Tommy Rees standpoint, but it's going to be interesting. Let's say 2 years from now, or even a year from now, we'll look at what Drew Pine did for Notre Dame. Okay. Under the tutelage of Tommy Rees. And then let's look and see what Drew Pine does at Arizona State under, was it Dillingham? Isn't he the new head coach out there?
Yeah. The guy from Oregon. Yeah.
Is a really good offensive coordinator. I mean, he did some pretty amazing things with the Minix kid from IU, right? Or Penix, excuse me. And let's see what he can do with Drew Pine. If Drew Pine is the same kid or worse, well, then what are we saying about Tommy Rees as a quarterback's coach / offensive coordinator? Because Dillingham is now a head coach at a Power 5 school. So it's going to be interesting to see. I will say that.
Yeah, I think so as well. This is a super chat from Christopher. So if we get Sam Hartman in 2023, then Kenny Minchie, and then Carr in 24. Thoughts on Tyler Buchner moving to slot receiver? A lot of options for him and plays there.
I do not like that plan at all. He's a quarterback. He's not a slot receiver. Sorry.
I agree.
He's not fast enough to be a slot receiver. I don't know what his hands are like. He's not a receiver. He's a quarterback, and he'll transfer before he becomes a slot receiver.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
No offense, Christopher. I think it's a good question because that's immediately what people think about an athletic quarterback is you could immediately move him to another position.
Yeah. And the other thing we didn't talk about, we were talking about the receivers. Well, I'll save it because we got the Braden Lenzy question coming up. We can segue into some receiver talk here in a second. So Braden Lenzy announced he's hanging up his cleats for good, going to work for a company called MetaSource on January 9th. That is a week from today. Scale of 1 to 10. How surprised are you that Braden Lenzy is just done with football?
I'm a little surprised, but at the same time, his lack of production at Notre Dame for whoever's fault that is, okay, and there's plenty of blame to go around, his lack of production at Notre Dame is going to make it difficult for him to get on a roster at the NFL level, right? And I wouldn't have any problem with him trying and testing out the NFL waters, going through the combine situation, but he probably wasn't going to get an invite to the combine. So it was going to be whatever they did at Notre Dame and however he was going to test, that whole thing. I want to say he's got 2 degrees from Notre Dame. Why not? It's the 4 for 40 thing, right? Use that degree. He's injury-free at this point. Go make your money. I'm happy for him as well. I'm glad he got to go out the way that he did with a long touchdown pass, with a nice reverse on the punt fake
punt. Yeah, and a little shovel pass thing too.
I mean, they basically used Braden Lenzy the way they should have been using him all along.
See, and that's
in the last game.
I think that's what surprised me about seeing this decision, this announcement that he made the next day. It's like, they just showcased you.
Yes.
It's like, I thought that there was more to come.
I felt so bad for the kid because it's like, yes, this is who he is. Like, we got it. Oh my goodness gracious.
I know.
And then when I saw that tweet, I was like, you know what? Good for you, man. Like, he used Notre Dame to its fullest advantage. At the very least, he got a degree and a half. I'm sure he's close to getting his master's done.
Probably
right?
so.
And because I don't know, he may have it, but he's gonna go put it to work, put it to use, man. Like, he wouldn't be doing that if he went to Oregon, which is where he was headed. You know what I mean?
That's
a master's degree and an undergrad from Notre Dame doesn't hold a candle to what it would have been at Oregon, right? So it's like, you know what? Good for you, my man.
Yeah,
good for you.
Yeah, like I said, I was surprised just because, he has had some really bad luck at his time here. He managed to stay healthy though this year, and again, like the way he went out, I guess that's maybe as good as you can hope for. The way he's had some misfortune in his time here at Notre Dame. I was, like a lot of people, I think, hoping that he might stick around for at least another year. So I was just surprised, again, like not even I'm going to enter the transfer portal and, go get a fresh start,
awesome.
Do a year someplace else or whatever. I'm going to work, I've got this job lined up. I'm starting next week. So
yeah,
good for him. That's what he wants to do. Some guys, I think, probably just decide it's time. I'm a little, for someone so young, I'm surprised that he made this decision this early on, but good for him because that's what he wants to do.
He's a mature kid, and he must have learned something in class. I mean, good for him.
Yeah. The other thing with the receiver that I was just kind of alluding to is they obviously have Love coming in next year, another running back, and we've talked about, maybe Tyree sees more time as a slot receiver or whatever. So I'm curious to see in the spring sort of what comes of that, exactly, where Tyree is both in the spring and in the fall, where he's working, is he still in that running back room? Because it's going to get even more crowded. They still have Jabron Payne back there as well. And of course they get Jadarian Price back next year. So it's going to be even more crowded than this year.
Oh yeah. There's no doubt about it. So, hey, I give him a lot of credit. I actually, like, I found myself like smiling as I was reading his Twitter announcement. I was like, okay, good for you, dude. Like, you do you, man.
That's right. Fill in the blank. Safety Brandon Joseph declaring for the NFL draft is blank.
Great for all parties. How about that? I don't know if he was asked back. Number one, I assume he was, but I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't. The second half production by him, whether it was injury related or otherwise, wasn't good. It wasn't good. And I would say overall, the experiment to bring him in wasn't one that worked out. I mean, it really didn't work out. And yes, he had the pick 6 in the Syracuse game, which was awesome. And he's still a good safety. His stock went down from the time that he ended up at Northwestern because his All-America year was 2 years ago. His last year at Northwestern was not an All-American year, and obviously this year was not an All-American year. So that All-American year, it can almost be like a one-off at this point if you're an NFL evaluator, unless you fall in love with some of the intangibles. So I just feel like he needed to come back, which makes me wonder if they just said, you know what, we're good.
I think his eyes were always on the NFL and just
Agreed.
the stuff with the ankle. You know, obviously, we're not in the training room and we don't know to what degree and, whatever. But it just felt like that's what it was always all about. And I was a little surprised that that like he didn't even opt out to begin with of the bowl
Yeah.
game.
Well, and he
It
wasn't
just
even dressed for the bowl game. I saw
exactly.
pictures. He was in
He
sweatpants.
was in
Like,
sweatpants and
and I
yeah.
wonder what that's about as well. And look, I was very happy with what he did from a punt return standpoint. He was 12th in the country in punt returns. That's great. I'll take
Yeah.
that all day. I had no problem with what he did back there, but he didn't make it the whole season, number one, which was not good. And, as a punt returner, as a player, period, you need him to be there all year. Notre Dame's going to have a ton of potential punt returners, to take his spot.
Now,
So that's not a big loss.
here's a legitimate question from It Ain't Rocket Science. Do you think teams avoided Joseph because of his All-American reputation? Because, like you listen to Alohi Gilman, his first year compared to his second year at Notre Dame, he was much more productive his first year, but he talked about how, he wasn't around the ball as much that second year because of the fact that they were avoiding him as much as possible.
I don't think he'd put anything on tape that would make anybody think that they needed to avoid him. I thought in the fall and in the spring, I'm talking about fall camp and in the spring, I thought, dude, this kid's gonna be special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this is gonna be a great replacement for Kyle Hamilton, all of those different things. Like, I wasn't alone in thinking that, and it was disappointing with the way the season turned out for him. And I don't think teams were avoiding him. I don't. I would have to go back and look specifically. I just don't think that that's the case. Yeah. They were avoiding Cam Hart. There's no doubt about that. That's why Benjamin Morrison had the year that he did, or one of the reasons. Now he's really, really good too. But there's guys that they were avoiding, and then there's guys that I don't think that they were.
Right. I agree. I tend to agree with that. Fill in the blank. ESPN's broadcast of the Gator Bowl was blank.
It was very clearly SEC homerish. I mean, they were audibly disappointed at the end of that game, especially the way the last drive kind of turned out and the way that just didn't work. Like, they were audibly disappointed, in my opinion. And I purposely kept the volume on as I was rewatching the game, and I haven't gotten to the second half yet. You can tell these guys do SEC network games. Let's put it that way. They love them some SEC. That's what it felt like to me.
Interesting. I didn't read that at all. What I read was just that it was a muddled, not very high quality broadcast.
Well,
starting with the fact that they missed the fake kick for a touchdown by South Carolina horrible. Because they were showing Xavier Watts' pass breakup for a 20th time on instant replay. And so then afterwards, they never even go back and show like a full, like regular camera angle, like, they would be showing it of what exactly happened, and it's the second time this season that ESPN has missed a live touchdown on the field when Notre Dame has had a game. Remember the North Carolina touchdown or, the touchdown Lorenzo Styles against North Carolina. They missed that live because of the same thing. And, then like, it was just, they were so busy trying to jam other stuff down our throats. That's what I, like the whole, when they mic'd up the two head coaches and they've got a split screen and they're showing them talking.
We missed 2 plays.
Exactly.
During that.
Exactly. And then they're interviewing Michael Mayer and Isaiah Foskey while the game is going on. And obviously as Notre Dame people,
plays.
What's that?
Missed even more plays.
Exactly. Exactly. And all this, it's all stuff that you do in the second half if the game turns into a blowout, but they're trying to jam it down everyone's throat in the first half. And it's like, none of this stuff is even sponsored. Why are you so focused on this? Why aren't you just showing us the game? That's what I don't get. It's like any game, and you and I have done games together, any game you over prepare in case you need it, but you're not always going to need everything. And for some reason, Like they decided that we needed all this extra fluff stuff during the broadcast. And that's what bothered me the most. And especially, just totally egregious when you miss a touchdown on the field and then you can't even go back and show it afterwards. And like if you look at the way the college football playoff games and like these New Year's Six bowls have been, their broadcasts have looked nothing like that. It's mostly about the game. Why does the Gator Bowl not need to be about the game? Why does it need to be about all this other stuff? That's what bugged me the most.
Well, and it was about promoting the CFP games too. I mean, there was one point where they had the two quarterbacks up. They had Stetson Bennett and whatever. They had quarterback up, and there was a play going on behind it. Like they got back to the play late because their two of them are hyping up the college football playoff game. Like I get it. The college football playoff game is so much more important than the game that is being played. I get that, but not to the people watching.
Yeah.
Like we want to see the game that we tuned in to watch.
Well, like D-Rock saying, too much of the Michigan quarterback's family, you mean girlfriend, during the TCU game. It's like,
nope, that was not too much of that. I'm just,
but nope. the always with the crowd shots and, I think there was a reason that they kept going back to that during that game.
Yeah.
But my point is, every quarterback's got a girlfriend. Every player's got a girlfriend. How many times do we need that cutaway shot? And she's going to be excited. Every girlfriend's going to be excited if their boyfriend makes a play. How many times do we need that? But
right, exactly.
And that's a big difference between a college broadcast and an NFL broadcast. Anyway, is the constant cutaways to the crowd shot in college football games.
Always with the parent shots. Oh yes. My goodness gracious.
The nervous parents or the excited parents, like they were doing it today during the Tulane game. They were talking about, like zooming in on the family, talking about the running back at Tulane and all this
ridiculous
stuff. Yeah. Fill in the blank. South Carolina head coach Shane Beamer saying after the game that he thought the officials tried to make it about themselves in the first half of the game. Is blank.
Sour grapes, man. Sour grapes. Like I said it before and I said it after the game. I do respect Shane Beamer and what he's doing down at South Carolina. I think he's a good coach. I really do. But man, there was a lot of excuses in the post-game press conference. A lot of excuses. We didn't have any players. The referees were terrible. He was praising SEC officials because that was a Big Ten crew, and how much better they are and how, they had the bar set so much higher for their officials than the group that was out there today. And, all of these, like, dude, give props to the other team, talk about the game, some stuff that you guys can do better, and move on. Like, that's going to be the lasting thing that we all have of Shane Beamer going into the offseason is him bitching about the depth chart and the officials.
Right.
Like, come on, man.
And like it's a blindside block. That's what the whole thing came down to.
It was a good call.
It was absolutely a good call. Like 10 years ago, you could still do that, but they changed that. I don't know how long it's been since they changed that, but it's been a while. It's been a few years. It's a blindside block and it's going to get called by a good official every time. Like Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, justifiably so, would have been complaining about that had they not called it a blindside block. It was a clear blindside block. And for him just to turn into a raving lunatic because of it, it was just like.
And you see it all the time with the blockers. All you got to do is go down there, get in the way, and put your hands in the air. It accomplishes the exact same objective. Outside of
and that's one thing that whoever that analyst was actually pointed out, and it was he was right about that. That's all you've got to do. Just stand in front of him, set a pick,
and you see it all the time. You see it all the time, and it's just as effective. It's all you need to do, and that's the point. It's a safety thing. I mean, J.D. Bertrand did not see that block coming by any stretch of the imagination and got blown up. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Completely agree. He's complaining about the wrong things,
Right.
There were a lot of other things, and he's right. There are times when officials do make it about themselves, but in this case, I don't think it was anywhere close to that.
No,
not at all. I mean, he made his reaction more about himself than anything else, because as someone pointed out, they had already given him a sideline warning, and he was already, starting to bark in the wrong directions, up the wrong trees. So
yes, 100%.
Super chat from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop.
Ooh.
Notre Dame is in a lose-lose situation with the bowl results. They wish Ohio State SC had so many guys missing. They lose. Notre Dame couldn't beat an SC team with
saying.
missing players. Just accept the results like a man. No excuse. Okay.
Yeah, I see what he's saying. So if they win, South Carolina had so many guys missing. They lose. Notre Dame can't beat South Carolina with so many guys missing, like that kind of. I totally agree with you. And the talking heads will make it about whatever they want, whatever the narrative they want it to be is what it will be. If they want it to be negative, it's easy to find negative things about that game. Tyler Buchner's terrible. He threw 3 interceptions, 2 pick sixes. Get him out of there. Bring in the transfer quarterback.
And this is a good point. That was like a great catch that was made in the end zone by the South Carolina wide receiver. But they showed the replay.
White chalk.
And it was like you could see a chunk come out of the white which would have been out of bounds. A chunk comes out of the white. So how is he in? And how does replay decides that was inconclusive when you can see a chunk come up from the out of bounds, which was the white part of the end zone?
Completely agree, but he never brought that up.
No.
So, and if they don't score there, because was that third down? I feel like that was a third down situation, or it was something along those lines anyway. If they don't score that, this is a completely different game. It's a completely different game. At that point. I'm going to look for that. I need to find it because that was let's see here. Oh, here we go. 42. Oh, 2nd and 11. It was 2nd and 11 because they just went. It was 1st and 10. They lost a yard on the run. And so it was 2nd and 11 from the 42-yard line. And it was a tie game at that point, 24-24.
Like Stymie and Chris both said, on that touchdown, didn't think that there was enough evidence to overturn blurry camera. And that's probably true. The camera angle was not good.
It was bad. I agree with that.
And it was blurry. But to me, and you agree, we hadn't even talked about this, but you could see a chunk of the turf come up from the white.
The white.
And
if that comes up, he was clearly had to touch it to make it come up. That's my issue. And Where's the pylon cam that's always around? Like, why is there no pylon cam? Like, that's not that expensive. Like, I don't understand why they didn't have that. You know what I mean? So, or at least maybe they had it, wasn't pointed in the right direction. I don't know.
Yeah. Another super chat. What happened with Snead? TV shows him being held down, but then a penalty call against him. Have a good night, guys. I love the show. Best wishes, 2023. Thank you, Charlie.
Don't know what happened because you and I watched the TV copy just like everybody else. We saw the exact same thing that you saw, Charlie. I have no idea what happened. And they, of course, another hit to the TV broadcast. They never went back and showed us what happened. They just moved on. Like, they didn't even think of it. They just moved on to the next play. They didn't even talk about it.
Yeah. I get so aggravated when, there's a scoring play and they, again, they want to do cutaway shots of the sideline and fans in the stands and then kick the extra point and all this stuff without showing us an instant replay. Yet, like I was talking about, we miss, a fake kick for a touchdown because they're showing Xavier Watts's pass breakup
over and over.
Yes. It's like, I want to see replays of big plays right away. Show me what happened once again. And they're always so slow on the trigger on those, it seems like.
Very much so.
All right, last question of the night. Do you buy or sell targeting should have been called on Michigan's last offensive play against TCU Saturday night?
This is a tough one because probably by rule it was targeting. But they've screwed the rule up so many times that I'm neither here nor there about it. Was it targeting? Maybe. Yeah, maybe it was. And maybe that kid should have just not even gotten involved because the kid was already being tackled. There was no reason for him to come up and hit that kid. And so maybe just out of stupidity, he should have a flag called on him, right? Obviously, I was rooting for Michigan to lose. So, of course, I was happy about that. So it probably should have been called. I mean, for being honest. But at the same time, they have screwed that call up so many times.
Very true.
Then, you know what? Whatever. I mean, whatever.
And there was a no call, as it ain't rocket science, brought up at the end of the USC Tulane game earlier today as well. And it's one of the big problems with targeting is the guys who are supposed to be in charge of knowing the rule and knowing when it should and shouldn't be called seem to be the worst at
Yes.
figuring out when it should and shouldn't be called. Because like you look at the TCU thing, the rule states no player shall target and make forcible contact against an opponent with the crown of his helmet. No player shall target and make forcible contact to the head or neck area of a defenseless opponent with the helmet, forearm, hand, fist, elbow, or shoulder. The TCU thing, total crown of the helmet up around the neck area. Like, if neither one of these calls in that TCU Michigan game, like that one especially, JD Bertrand should never been flagged for targeting this year if that wasn't a targeting call, because I've heard like, oh, you can't bail them out. And it's like, look, either it's targeting or it isn't. It doesn't matter what down it is. It doesn't matter when it happens in the game.
I agree.
Either it's targeting or it isn't. And you've got to call it if it is. And by the way the rule is written, the TCU thing definitely should have been targeting.
Yeah, it probably should have been. But like I said, they've screwed it up so many times. I'm not losing any sleep over it. And I'm sure the Michigan fans are hot and, all of these different things because it's the last thing that they could grasp onto in that game. So, I mean, I get it. I don't know. Like I said, Notre Dame has been screwed over so many times by targeting that I just don't feel bad for anybody that doesn't get it called in their direction.
Yeah, see, the hit on Harrison. Did you see the hit on Harrison in the Ohio State game?
I think so.
It's like, okay, so you got him. It was more around the shoulder. That one was a lot more gray to me of any of them, because it was, shoulder.
Yeah.
And it didn't see, like you didn't have like the big, leading with the crown of the helmet and all that kind of stuff. But, again, there's too much interpretation on all these calls. That's the problem with it. And that's why when ejection is on the line and there's so much gray area in the way one official to the next and one replay official to the next is or isn't going to call it, you've got to change the rule.
Yep.
I think.
I agree completely. The rule it's a terrible rule to begin with. The whole thing needs to be changed, but that's another show.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've got an off season, so we've got plenty of time to talk about.
We do have plenty of opportunity. You are not wrong, sir.
That's right. All right. So what time does Upon Further Review start tonight?
I think 8:00. So 45 minutes, folks.
You better go get some dinner then.
All right.
Get ready.
I ate before this show, so I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready, baby. And somebody was worried. They're like, oh, he hasn't even watched the second half yet for Upon Further Review. I watched the second half. I just haven't watched the second half with the volume up, to really focus on the announcers. So this will be my second time going through the whole
I was
thing.
rewatching yesterday, and I actually had a CD in. I got the Tom Petty Live at the Fillmore 4 CD set for Christmas. So I had disc 1 in, and I had the volume down on the game. It was much more enjoyable watching.
I bet it was.
Even though I was still annoyed that there was no you couldn't see that fake kick go for a touchdown.
It was horrible. I thought when it was live, because I don't have the ability to back it up, right? When it was live, I was like, man, did I miss that? Like, what just happened? Like, did I put my head down? Did I blink? Like, what happened? And then as I'm rewatching, I'm like, oh my God, they didn't even show it live. This is terrible.
Brutal.
Terrible.
Brutal. Absolutely. All right. Well, you guys have a good show tonight. Thanks for stopping by. To everybody else tonight, hit the like button on your way out. If you would, subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast channels. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.